In this lesson, we're going to look at the demand curve and actually derive it in a different way. We're going to focus on two important concepts which will be valuable when we consider how markets work and consumers and firms interact in markets. And these two concepts are marginal benefit and consumer surplus. So in deriving the demand curve this way, we'll be able to highlight these important ideas. So rather than consider buying apples versus orange or grapes versus bananas, I want to generalize this a little bit and think about consuming the commodity of anything. We'll call it X. It could be grapes, of course. It could be computers. And we want to consider the option of buying that certain amounts of that X compared to lots of other things. So the best way to think about this is ask what the willingness to pay would be for a consumer to get 1 unit of X, 2 units of X, 3 units of X, and so on. Sometimes you could think of this as the willingness to pay approach to deriving the demand curve. It's very similar to the idea of considering utility, but it's a little more general in the sense you consider more than one good, which makes sense in the real world, because when you can consume a certain amount of X, you use money to spend on that, you consume less of a whole bunch of other things and not just one thing. So let's get started with this. So I've got a numerical example where I'm looking at the amount of a particular good, let's just call it X for generality, and that can range, for example, from consuming none of it to 5 of it, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Willingness to pay represents how valuable, how much benefit this good in certain quantities gives to this consumer that we're considering. So if there's none of X, then willing to pay none for none, $0. For 1, let's assume that the consumer is willing to pay $5. For 2, willing to pay $8. For 3, $9.50, and so on up to 5 units where the consumer would pay $11. Now note, the more of item X the consumer has, the more benefit it's bringing. The more that consumer would be willing to pay for it. It goes up. 8 is greater than 5, 9.50 is greater than 8, and so on. But also note that by the amount by which the willingness to pay rises, the amount by which that benefit rises is decreasing as more is consumed. So the willingness to pay for getting 1 rather than 0 is 5. The willingness to pay for getting 2 rather than 1 is 3, 8 minus 5. The willingness to pay to get 5 rather than 4 is just 50 cents, 11 minus 10.50. And that difference in willingness to pay, economists call the marginal benefit. And that's put in the third column of this table. So the marginal benefit of one item is, again, $5, going from 0 to 5. The marginal benefit of a second item, if you already consumed 1, is $3. And so on. The marginal benefit of consuming 5, if you're already consuming 4, is 50 cents. Economists, for obvious reasons, call this diminishing marginal benefit. The more of an item that is being consumed, the smaller the increase in marginal benefit that occurs as you consume an additional unit of that item. Okay, so that's the marginal benefit. And what we're going to see is the demand curve, which we're trying to derive, is really just coming directly from this marginal benefit. And to illustrate that, I'm going to use a graph. And the graph is going to put the quantity on the horizontal axis and dollars on the vertical axis. And I'm going to plot the marginal benefit or different quantities demanded, whether it's X or Y or bananas. In the table, we had a number for the marginal benefit of one item, which, if you recall, was $5. And then we had the marginal benefit for a second item going from 1 to 2, which is $3. The marginal benefit of the third item was a $1.50. The marginal benefit of the fourth item, $1. And the marginal benefit of the fifth item is 50 cents. So you can see now that the marginal benefit is going down the more that is consumed. Now let's ask ourselves, how much would this consumer buy of this item X depending on the price? So let's put the price on the vertical axis in dollars and ask, what if the price is $6? How much would be consumed? What if the price is $7? What if the price is $3? So on the axis here, I put prices between $7 and $5, and I put it on right on the axis because at that price, the consumer wouldn't buy any of X because the price of the item, the $6, is higher than the marginal benefit. And so you wouldn't buy any at that point. If something's worth only $5 to you and the price is $6, you'll say, hey, I'm not buying that at all. But then when the price gets to $5, then it's worth your while, because the marginal benefit is $5, to buy it. You're just right on the margin there, so let's assume the consumer buys it at $5. And then if the price falls some more, say to $4, you'll still say, well, I'll continue to buy one because the marginal benefit is 5, which is greater than 4. But the marginal benefit of a second item is only $3. So if the price is 4, I'm not going to buy that. If the price is $3.50, I'm not going to buy that. But when the price gets to 3, you say, hey, okay, it's worth it getting this item, so you purchase that item. And you continue down this way. The price gets $2. When it gets to $1.50, you move over to 3. When it gets to 1, you move over to 4. When it gets to 50 cents, you move over to 5. And what we've just done is derive the demand curve for this consumer. It's a downward sloping relationship between the price and the quantity demanded for this individual. As the price comes down, the quantity demanded goes up. And if you think about this for a minute, those dots are simply the marginal benefits of this particular good. So in a way, for an economist, the demand curve is just the marginal benefit curve. And the demand curve slopes downward because of this marginal benefit declining as more is produced. So diminishing marginal benefit, this declining marginal benefit, is in fact the reason the demand curve slopes down. Now frequently we don't have steps like this in demand curves that we just sketched. That's because you have choices between different levels of x, not just 1 and 2. You could get 1.1 or 1.2. So generally speaking, we just kind of fill in the difference without those steps, and that makes it a little easier to see. And that's what I've done in this line here. I've just connected them together to show you that now it looks more like a demand curve. Now it might be useful to just do this by hand once, just to show you how this demand curve comes out. So let me do that on this screen. I'm going to draw a couple of axes in here, and I'm going to put on this axis the units, the quantity of x, whatever it happens to be. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And on the other axis, I'm going to put the marginal benefit measured in dollars. And so the range of that's also going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I'm just going to plot those same points. I'm just basically doing the same thing as was done in the computer diagram, but just to illustrate. So at 1 unit, you got a marginal benefit of 5. I plot that point. At 2 units, the marginal benefit is 3. At 3 units, we got 150. At 4, it was 1. And at 5, it was 50 cents. Okay, so I'm just sketching it in that way by hand. Now let's consider the prices, because we're going to ask if that represents the consumer, what's the amount purchased going to be in terms of quantity of X? Well, so we go up here and say, if the price is in this range, how much will the consumer buy? And the answer is nothing, because the price is, say, $5.50, $6 in that range. It's greater than $5, so you buy nothing. But then if the price gets down to about 5, you say, oh, okay, I'll get it. And so you come over that way. And you continue dropping the price from 4, say, $3.50, and the prediction all through then will be 1 unit until you hit 3, and then we go to the description of 2 units, and then continue to lower the price, get the same thing, you jump over to here, lower the price further, and I think you get the idea now. It's becoming pretty straightforward. You can do this many different ways, but now, again, you got this downward sloping demand curve, which is what we were aiming for. Now, once you get this downward sloping demand curve, again, you can represent it in different ways, but you get a very key idea that comes out of economics, and it comes from what we just did. The consumer we're looking at is choosing an amount to consume. Call it X, call it grapes, whatever it happens to be in your example, such that the marginal benefit equals the price. And that's what we saw coming down as we lowered the price. We noticed when the price equals the marginal benefit, that was the amount that the consumer wanted to consume. The consumer effectively looks at that price in the market, takes that price as a given, how much it costs to buy X, and will adjust the consumption so the marginal benefit is exactly equal to that price. And so when you see a demand curve, at least when I see a demand curve, I think of it as the marginal benefit to consumers. And it also tells you why economists generally put the quantity on the horizontal axis of a demand or a supply diagram. And that's because economists tend to think of the marginal benefit of different levels of the good. And so putting quantity on the horizontal axis and marginal benefit on the vertical axis measured in dollars tends to emphasize that point. Now, given that we've derived the demand curve this way, it gives us a nice concept to think about, and we'll eventually use this concept actually in many ways, but first to show how markets actually work. So the consumer surplus is based on the fact that the willingness to pay is usually greater than the price. You know, for example, the willingness to pay for my sunglasses or eyeglasses or whatever is usually worth more than the price. If I have to pay $100 for my glasses, that's nice, but they're worth a lot more than that to me because I wouldn't be able to be talking or seeing people or giving lectures if I couldn't see anything. So the value or the willingness to pay, the benefit, let's call it, the benefit or the willingness to pay, same thing, is usually greater than the price. And consumer surplus measures that difference. And we can measure that consumer surplus by the area under the demand curve above the price in the diagrams we just drew. And so let's do that in terms of the pictures that we have just looked at. Take this picture, for example, is the demand curve. And now we want to illustrate the consumer surplus in this diagram. So let's start by assuming the price is $4. We know what's going to be consumed then. So in the diagram, I will put in the price of $4. I'll just draw it in the diagram. That's the price, just label it. And at that price, the consumer pays $4, but remember the marginal benefit of one item is $5. So the consumer surplus is $1, right? It's $1. The benefit of the good is $5, only paid $4, you get $1 consumer surplus. And since that's 1 and the direction over here is 1, you can represent that by that little area. That's the $1, if you like, of consumer surplus. It's the area under the demand curve. Let's suppose then that, as another example, the price is $2. Get rid of that for a second. So let's suppose the price is $2. That's right there. Okay. Now we would be predicting that for this price, the consumer would buy 2 units. That's what the demand curve is telling us right at that point, buy 2 units. But the marginal benefit of that second unit is 3, right there, that's a 3. The price is 2, and so there's a consumer surplus of $1 for that good. That's that distance right there. And since the horizontal distance is a unit, it's the area under that curve, or that particular place that represents the consumer surplus. But then the first item consumed, number 1, with a marginal benefit of 5, price is still just 2, so there's an extra consumer surplus of 3 there, all that distance here. And so that's represented by this area, 1 unit times the 3. And so in terms of dollars, the consumer surplus now is 4. You got that area there, that area there, that area there, that area there. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, it's 4, but more importantly, in terms of our illustration here, it's the area that's under that demand curve. And so consumer surplus is a very important thing because it tells you how much consumers are getting out of the markets, and it's usually more than you guess because of this consumer surplus. To use this idea for the market as a whole, and remember that's where we're going, we're deriving a market demand curve, we want to consider all the consumers in the market, just like we've considered one. We want to add up all the amount they consume, add up the quantity demanded by all the individuals at each price to get the market demand. And we're going to add horizontally to do this. So I want to illustrate that with a little diagram. Here we go. So this diagram has a consumer named Olivia and a consumer named Andrew. We know how to derive Olivia's demand curve and Andrew's demand curve from their marginal benefits of the good in question. So let's do that, and then to get the market demand curve, we'll add up how much Olivia and Andrew consume at the different prices. Okay, so we put in that dot here, that's the marginal benefit of 1 unit from Olivia, it's $5. Assume Andrew's the same, that's his marginal benefit of a good. It looks like twins there, they're doing the same thing, that's fine, doesn't have to be that way, but their marginal benefit is 5. And so we would predict that at the price of 5, they consume 1 each, 1 plus 1 is 2, so in the market demand curve, we put a 2 up there, a quantity of 2, at the price of $5. So notice how we summed horizontally the 1 plus 1 at the $5 price and got 2 at the $5 price in the market demand curve, which was what is at the bottom. The market demand curve, again, is just the sum of the quantities demanded at each price for Olivia and Andrew, or anyone else happens to be in the market. So we do the same thing at the other prices. So we know that the marginal benefit was 3. Let's assume it's the same for Andrew at 2 units. Now we're going to sum across. If the price in the market was 3, we'd predict Andrew consumes 2, Olivia consumes 2. So the sum of them is 4. So at a market price of 3, the quantity demanded in the market is 4, and that's the market demand curve. And we just continue that way. So there's your case where the quantity demanded is 3 at that price, quantity demand is that price for Andrew. We look at the same price, and down there we get the sum, which is 3 plus 3 is 6, and so on. So it becomes routine. We just added them in, and we get the individual demand curves, which we've derived now, adding up to the market demand curve. And then to make it easier to see, we can just connect the dots. There's the 2 individual demand curves for Olivia and Andrew, and there's the market demand curve, which consists of the market with just these 2 at this point. But clearly you can do the same thing by having Olivia and Andrew and Cynthia and many other people as well. So what we've done now is, starting with the idea of the benefit and the marginal benefit of a good, the idea of the consumers trying to do the best they can in the market. They will set their marginal benefit equal to the price. We'll get the demand curve for each individual, and from that we compute the market demand curve, and that was our objective in the first place. Thank you.